Dr. Banister, a local demographer and statistician. Judy was raised Protestant, and then at about 18, she took a course on the history of religion and found out she really wasn't. She's been a very active participant in the local atheist community, and is a committed humanist. And it's a pleasure to welcome Judith to this side of the podium.
Thank you. Good morning. We're going to have some fun this morning, figuring out just how many non-believers there are in the United States, and also what's happening on the believer side and the transitional side of the spectrum of religiosity. Using my trusty pointer. Okay, so this talk is called By the Numbers, Non-Belief in the United States. The data are from the last decade, so 2007 to 2017. This presentation is based on data from the Pew Research Center. I'm sure you've all heard of this very reputable organization. They are nonpartisan, non-biased, not pro-religion or anti, and they do surveys on lots of things, not just religion. But they are excellent and the prime source for information on belief and non-belief in the United States. So I'm coming at this from the perspective of a strong humanist and atheist. And the order of topics is, fasten your seatbelts, the bad news first. And then, before you get too discouraged, the good news and the positive data and trends that are going on. And then we'll discuss what we can do as modern, enlightened humanists and atheists to further the very real progress that Pew Research has documented. So why use Pew Research Center? Well, they have enormous surveys about religion. 35,000 people, that's a huge survey. And it means they can get data that's valid for every state. In addition, because the survey is large enough to get data by state. And they can also get data on small religious groups or small secular groups even if they wanted to. They also do another set of surveys that are 5,000 people or more, and they do the same sample surveys over time. And that means the same questions are being asked 7 years apart or 5 years apart. And they're documenting the changes in that short period of time, which you will see. They are objective, they are impartial, it's the best available information. And not only that, they don't just ask a simple question like, do you believe in God? And stop there. Oh no. They go after measures of people's actions as well as their words. Do you go to church or not? Do you pray or not? How important is religion in your daily life? Do you use religion to help you make ethical decisions or not? That kind of thing. So it's really very deep, much better than any other sources of information. Now, the most important weakness of the Pew surveys, particularly the surveys, the big ones, the 35,000 people surveys in 2007 and again 2014. The main problem is the main question. And this is the wording of the main question. Close your eyes for a second. Just close your eyes for a second and think, okay, I'm answering the telephone. This is a telephone survey. The interviewer comes on the telephone and says, okay, you know, I'd like you to participate in this survey about religion in America. Would you be willing, da-da-da-da? And then they ask this question. Here it is. What is your present religion, if any? Are you Protestant, Roman Catholic, Mormon, Orthodox, such as Greek or Russian Orthodox, Jewish, Muslim, Buddhist, Hindu, atheist, agnostic, something else, or nothing in particular? Now check the wording of that question. Number one, it's a very long, wordy question. And number two, there are lots of alternative religion choices before they ever get to the non-religion choices. And there's a reason for this, because what Pew was trying to do with these surveys originally, when they started this, was to actually measure each little religious group or big religious group in the country. Their focus was on the religious groups, not the non-religious groups. We are an afterthought in these surveys. Later they realized, wait a minute, we should be doing more on the non-religious, but they were focusing on the religions in acute, huge, massive detail. So that was their focus, and you can see we're the afterthought at the end of the question. Okay, so I think that this question biases respondents in favor of answering whatever they were raised in, say Protestant or Catholic or Jewish or Buddhist or whatever, rather than saying atheist, agnostic, something else, or nothing in particular, because that's sort of at the end. You've run out of, you've stopped listening by the end of this question. Okay, so that's a problem. There's a bias there, away from non-religion and toward answering in a religious group. Okay, but based on, even with that problem, let's go with the answers. The bad news first. Only in 2014, the latest of these surveys, only 7% of the U.S. adult population, age 18 and older, selected atheist or agnostic. 3% said they were atheists. 4% said they were agnostic. And then a big chunk of people said nothing in particular. Now that's an interesting group. Who are they? Nothing in particular. It means they're not saying they're Protestant, they're not saying they're Catholic, they're not saying they're Jewish or some other religious group. They're just saying nothing in particular. So Pew Research adds all these up and calls them the term unaffiliated. Unaffiliated meaning not affiliated with any particular religious group, church or synagogue or temple. And then in the something else category is groups like Unitarians, Wiccans, and Humanists. So, I mean, they didn't really count the Humanists because that was the something else category. People had to volunteer, I am a humanist, when that question was not asked. So this surely is an underestimate of humanists. So this nothing in particular group. Okay, wait a minute. The unaffiliated category was 23% of the U.S. population in 2014 and has been rapidly increasing from 2007 to 2014 and probably since then. Okay, so that's where that 23% number comes from, where people think that the non-religious in America are 23%. But that's not quite right. Who are these nothing in particular respondents? There's a positive side to these people, which is that they are not identifying with a particular religious church or synagogue or temple. That means that they're not part of the problem of organized religion in the U.S. and all the negative things that organized religions are up to. Not all of them, of course, but many of them. So they're not part of that problem. They're not doing the harmful organized religion stuff. At least we don't think they are. But they are a heterogeneous group. And fortunately, Pew Research asked a second question of this group. They said, if you're nothing in particular, how important is religion to you in your life? If the answer was not too important or not at all important, that was 8.8% of U.S. adults, while 6.9% said, religion is very important or somewhat important to me. And I think that latter category, which is 6.9% of adults, is not secular and non-religious. That's a part of the nothing in particular group who are still religious. They're just not associated with a particular religious church. Okay, so a better estimate as of 2014 of the total non-believers in the U.S. could be taking the self-described atheists agnostics, and humanists, plus the nothing in particular respondents who say religion is not important in their lives. And that adds up to about 16.2% of the US population in 2014. So that's the bad news. Part of the bad news. There's more. Sorry. So the 2014 survey asked respondents, here's the question: do you believe in God or a universal spirit? Answer yes or no, or don't know, or other. Okay? So their definition of God is this extremely broad thing called a universal spirit. Well, guess what? I know lots of people who say, I don't believe in God, but I think the universe is all connected in these wonderful woo-woo ways, and everything's linked up, and we're all one, and isn't it wonderful, ain't it groovy? You know what I mean? Most of us feel that way. I mean, we are in awe of the wonders of the universe. We relate to other people. We think everybody's connected. We're all one. We're all good. The universe is all connected in ways we don't fully understand, but that we understand a lot. And those connections are there. Okay, so people who believe that might say, I believe in a universal spirit. That's vague enough. It's New Age, it's undefined, it's all-encompassing, it sounds good. Nobody can give you trouble, you don't have to define it. Who's going to bother with you if you say, I believe in universal whatever? So you get away with believing in something without having to defend it. Okay, so this is a biased question, okay? The likelihood is that people will answer yes. They'll say, yes, I believe in God or a universal spirit, yes. That it's biased very strongly toward that answer. Okay, so look. You got a huge amount of yes answers. 63% of the total adult population said, I believe in God or a universal spirit, and I'm absolutely certain about that. And then another 20% said, I believe in God and I'm fairly, or a universal spirit, and I'm fairly certain about that. Then there was this group, 5%, not too certain, not at all certain. 1%, I believe in God, but I don't know how certain I am. And only 9% who said, no, I do not believe in God or a universal spirit. Only 9%. So, as of 2014, 89% of US adults responded yes. They believe in God or a universal spirit. And even among the unaffiliated, remember that group, unaffiliated? 61% say, yes, I believe in God or a universal spirit. That's how broad that question is. In addition, here's other measures that Pew Research got of religiosity or religious practice. Of all US adults in 2014, 55% said they pray every day. 53% say religion is very important to them, and 50% attend religious services at least monthly. So that's what we're looking at. That's what we're up against. That's the problem. Okay, so bad news conclusions. By 2014, only about 16% of the US adults were likely non-believers, as I've shown you how I calculated that, based on Pew data. At the same time, only 9% of US adults clearly responded that they do not believe in God or a universal spirit, and another 2% said they don't know. So who were the ones who responded no to that question? Well, I would have responded no, I do not believe in God or a universal spirit. My answer would be no. Okay, but who else? Okay, only 33% of the unaffiliated said no. I don't believe in God or a universal spirit. And another 6% of the unaffiliated said, I don't know. But others who answered no were in the religion categories, some of them. For example, Buddhists, 27% of them said, no, I don't believe in God or a universal spirit, and 4% said don't know. of the Jews, or people who define themselves as Jewish. 17% said no, I don't believe in God or a universal spirit, and another 4% of Jews said I don't know. 10% of Hindus said I don't believe in God or a universal spirit, and of the mainline Protestants, all the different Protestant groups together, and the Catholics, 2% of them said no, I don't believe in God or a universal spirit. All right, let's go to the good news. You all look so depressed out there. I'm sorry. I hate to do that to you, but now we're looking at the good side of levels and trends. Trends are good, very good. Between 2007 and 2014, based on comparable Pew surveys, the same survey 2 times, there was a sharp increase in what is called what Pew calls the unaffiliated population. It's imperfect, but we got to use that temporarily. We got to use that measure. Okay, so an increasing proportion of U.S. adults go into the unaffiliated category, which includes nothing in particular, atheist, and agnostic. You will note the biggest change on this graph is that there were only 16% in the unaffiliated category in 2007, and this rose to 23% in 2014. That's only 7 years. That's very fast. So that's a shift toward atheists, toward agnostics, and toward nothing in particular, which means away from formal religious groups, churches and stuff like that. And then you can see the other trends, a very slight drop in the evangelical Protestants. They're still a quarter of the population in 2014. A drop in the Catholics, a drop in the mainline Protestants, and a slight rise in the non-Christian faiths. So Pew is documenting all these different trends from all these categories in minute detail. Oh, sorry. So there was a rapid growth of the unaffiliated group from 37 million in 2007 to 56 million in 2014. And if you look closely at the religious nones, which means the unaffiliated group, the atheist and agnostic together rose 3% of the population, up from 4% to 7% of the population. Atheist rose, agnostic rose. Nothing in particular rose from 12% to 16%. And among them, religion not important grew faster than the group who said religion is important. So the net unaffiliated rose from 16 to 23%, or a 7% rise in only 7 years, which is good news. And this is the most exciting news. So this unaffiliated category, whatever that means, this is the percent of each generation who identify their religion as atheist, agnostic, or nothing in particular. Note, the elders, only 11%. Baby boomers, 17%. Generation X, 23%. But the millennials, over a third of the millennials are nothing in particular or atheist or agnostic. That's great. So, folks, we've got our work cut out for us. We need to help encourage the youth in their trends that they're already involved in. They're already on this path. Just give them encouragement and give them good options in the atheist and humanist world. There's also, Pew has measured very carefully something called religiosity. It's a composite measure that they have created out of self-reported rates, what the people say themselves on the phone, about how often they attend worship services, how frequently they pray, how certain they are that they of their God or universal spirit, and how important religion is in their lives. This is the composite measure. They make it into one measure. And then they break those into three categories: high religiosity or religious commitment, medium religiosity or religious commitment, and low religiosity or religious commitment. I struggled on their websites to find an actual concrete definition of low commitment or low religiosity, but I couldn't find it. So I'll have to go after them and see if I can get an actual perfect definition of it. Okay, so this is an important chart. Low religiosity has been growing. In 2007, 14% of adults had low religiosity, and by 2014, 19%. The people with high religious commitment are dropped from 60 to 55%. Medium stood about steady. But this is the oldest generation, the boomers, the Generation X, and the millennials. Let's go the trends are best and greatest for the younger generations. The millennials dropped from 50% who said religion was of high religious commitment, down to 43%. Medium stayed close to the same, but low religious commitment, low religiosity, grew from 19% of millennials to 29% of millennials in only 7 years. That's terrific. Okay, so there is hope for the future here, by generation. Let me go back there. There's another thing. I mean, so some of the groups, there's improvement even among, the oldest generation. There's slight drop in religiosity, but not much change. Boomers, about the same. But Generation X, not much change either. It's mostly the millennials, yeah? And the same surveys. Wait a minute, I think I've missed something. All right, yeah. So, then there's another set of surveys from 2012 and 2017, 5 years apart. This is a smaller sample, 5,000 rather than 35,000. So they're not trying to get it by state or by great detail. These are very broad questions. But that still qualifies as a very large survey. Because as you know, most polls are like 1,000 plus people of the nation. Okay, so this is still a large survey. It's still a phone survey, both cell phones and landlines. And the survey asked, and it's important how this question is asked. You have to listen to how the questions are asked. That biases things in certain directions. So the survey asked, generally speaking, do you think of yourself as a religious person or not? I think that's a pretty good question myself. And of U.S. adults, in 2012, 65% said, yes, I think of myself as a religious person. But this declined to only 54% in 2017, this year. That's a big drop in 5 years of people who think of themselves as religious, whatever that means. They're defining it themselves, okay? Pew isn't telling them what religious means. The respondents are responding according to what they think religious means. Same surveys, here we go. Now this is the positive, this is some positive stuff. It may not look like it to us, humanists and atheists, but this is positive stuff. Generally speaking, do you think of yourself as a spiritual person or not? In 2012, 78% of the U.S. adults said yes, and in 2017, 75%. In other words, hardly any change. In both years, more U.S. respondents thought of themselves as spiritual, quote, whatever that means, than religious. And here's how Pew graphs it. So the people who were religious but not spiritual stayed the same, only 6% of the population. This is us, people who are neither religious nor spiritual. The humanists, the atheists, the nonbelievers, rose from 16% in 2012 to 18% in 2017. So that's slow progress, but it's progress. The people who are both religious and spiritual dropped sharply from 59% to 48%. And this is an important category here that Pew Research really looks into. The people who call themselves spiritual, they answer yes to the spiritual question, but no to the religious question. And that rose from 19% to 27% of the US adult population in only 5 years. So, those who think of themselves as neither religious nor spiritual rose from 16% to 18% of adults. That's us. And I see this group as the core non-believers. Speaking for myself only, I see this category as that portion of the US population who are non-superstitious and who tend to be more clear-thinking about religion than others. Pew Research, however, focuses a lot on this spiritual but not religious group. And they emphasize the importance of this group because they think it signals a shift away from strong religious identity toward a more amorphous spiritual identity, whatever that means. And this is all self-defined, as I said. And it's across the board, all demographic groups, okay? So the spiritual but not religious who answered no, I'm not spiritual, no, I'm not religious, yes, I'm not spiritual. Women, huge increase in the spiritual but not religious. Men too. All races, white, black, Hispanic, all shifting toward, away from saying I'm religious, toward saying I'm spiritual. And party affiliation, even Republicans. 23% of them say they are spiritual but not religious, and Democrats 32%. So across the board, it's happening everywhere, it's happening in every group. This guy, Alan Cooperman, is here he is speaking at the American Atheist Convention this last summer. Mark and I went, Debbie went, and he runs these Pew Research religion surveys. He's the leader of the big teams who do these surveys. He said, and he talked about, he was talking about atheists to American atheists naturally, and he said there was a rise from 1.6% to 3.1% of the population who said they're atheists. But people who call themselves atheists grew from 2% of the were 2% of the boomers, but 5% of the millennials by 2014. That's pretty good. And agnostics increased, of course, at the same time. So, and also, as we were noting, some adults say they are Protestant, Catholic, Jewish, Buddhist, or some other religion, but they are actually non-believers. And some, for example, Reformed Jews, we know them. We know Reformed Jews. I know some personally, my close friends, who are devout atheists. What my brother calls born-again atheist, right? That's me. Who are, but they want to keep the cultural aspects of Judaism. They go to the temple, they participate in lots of stuff, but they don't believe any of it. And here's a guy who spoke at the American Atheist Convention he wrote a book called Atheist Meditation, Atheist Spirituality, and he spoke to the convention about secular Buddhism. This is Mark. And he outlined what a secular Buddhist is. He defined it himself. It's minus the gods, the gurus, the pseudoscience, and the supernaturalism, only based on what is based on reason and science, and heavy into meditation techniques, philosophical principles, and ethics without the garbage. So, let's recap what we found out from all these data. How many non-believers are there in the United States? The lowest possible estimate is to say the 9% of US adults who answered no, I do not believe in God or a universal spirit. That was only 9%. If you want to really be discouraging, use that number. But a higher and reasonable estimate is those who reported that they are atheists, agnostics, humanists, and nothing in particular, who also said that religion is not important to them, 16.2% of adults as of 2014. But it's changing why I keep saying as of 2014 or as of 2017, because it's changing every year so fast. The progress is rapid. For a slightly higher estimate, which I think is legitimate, we could add to the 16.2% the respondents who identified with a particular religion, a specific religion, but said no, they do not believe in God or a universal spirit. That adds up to an additional 1.5% of adults, totaling 17.7% of U.S. adults in 2014. A slightly higher estimate, or the same, you could say, is as of 2017, the 18% of U.S. adults who are neither spiritual nor religious. And the highest estimate would be in 2014, the 19% of U.S. adults who had low religiosity, low levels of religious commitment, as defined by how important religion is in their lives, whether they go to church or synagogue, whether they pray, all that stuff. Action rather than just words. Who are the hardcore religious in America? Okay, the lowest estimate is the 54% of U.S. adults who think of themselves as religious in 2017. That's the ones who are religious and not spiritual, or who are religious and spiritual. Only 54% of U.S. adults. I thought it was worse than that. Or in 2014, the 55% of adults who say they have high religious commitment. A higher estimate would be the 63% of U.S. adults in 2014 who were absolutely certain that there is a God or universal spirit. Okay, so these are my estimates of the hardcore religious in America, and it's still massive, too high, okay, from my perspective. And there's this middle group, this transitional group perhaps, the 27% of U.S. adults who see themselves as spiritual but not religious. So here's the most positive picture from my perspective of non-believers and believers in the U.S. today. 18 to 19% are non-believers. 27% are in the middle or in transition, we hope. And 54 to 55% are religious believers. So in conclusion, we should not be using the 22.8% estimate from Pew of the unaffiliated to mean non-believers. It's not correct. It's an exaggeration. However, things are moving rapidly in that direction, but we're not there yet. So I would like to plead that we not be guilty of the same self-deception as religious people engage in when they cling to superstitious beliefs for which there's no evidence. This evidence does not support the 22.8% figure, but it does support up to 19%. So, close enough. So, in conclusion, it's discouraging to the extent of non-belief in the U.S. today, still so low, only 9 to 19% of adults. Equally discouraging, of course, is the excess power that religion is exercising in our communities and in our national government and in our nation as a whole, everywhere, all the time. But on the positive side, the shifts toward low religiosity and more secularism are surprisingly rapid. What can we do in this, given this situation? What can we, humanists and atheists, do? Actually, we've been doing great work.